My name is Bella, and I am 28 years old. As I held my father's hand, feeling the last weak pulse fade into stillness, the sterile quiet of the hospital room was broken only by the rhythmic beep of a machine that no longer measured a life. He was gone. My mother and my brother, Leo, were not there. They chose to attend a high-profile investor gala instead. A glittering party of champagne and ambition across town. They chose business over their husband and father's final moments. They chose the company over the man who built it. The door creaked open an hour later. My mother, Ilara, and my brother, Leo, swept in, their faces flushed not with grief, but with the thrill of a successful evening. They didn't see a grieving daughter. They saw an obstacle. Bella. Darling, my mother began. Her voice, a practiced whisper of sympathy. We came as soon as we could. It was a crucial night for the company. Leo didn't even bother with condolences. He placed a leather-bound folder on the bedside table, next to my father's now still hand. We need you to sign these, he said, his tone clipped and urgent. It's just a formality to transfer Dad's voting shares. It ensures a smooth transition. A cold rage. Clean and sharp. Cut through the fog of my sorrow. They hadn't come to mourn with me. They had come to claim their prize before the body was even cold. I looked from the papers to their expectant faces, and a single, guttural word escaped my lips. Out. Bella. Don't be dramatic. My mother chided. I said. I repeated, my voice low and shaking with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Get out. I swept the folder off the table, sending papers scattering across the floor. Get out of this room now to understand their monstrous audacity. You have to understand the Sterling Hotel Group. My father, Richard Sterling, built it over 30 years from a single boutique hotel into a $40 million empire. He believed in quality, in loyalty, in treating his staff like family. I grew up in his world, not as a princess, but as an apprentice. I started at 16 parking cars, spent summers in housekeeping, and worked my way through every department: concierge, kitchen management, event planning. I earned my degree in hospitality management and came back to learn the financial side, sitting in on every budget meeting, every negotiation. My father taught me the soul of the business, the names of the doormen, the thread count of the sheets, the delicate balance of ambition and integrity. The staff respected me because they watched me earn my place. My older brother, Leo, never had to earn anything. He was the golden child, the heir apparent. He was given a fancy title, Vice President of Acquisitions, and a corner office with a view. He had my father's name, but none of his wisdom. Leo saw the hotels not as a legacy, but as a chessboard for his ego. He pursued flashy, high-risk deals, acquiring overpriced properties in saturated markets and launching disastrous marketing campaigns that bled the company dry. He was charming, handsome, and utterly incompetent. My mother, Ilara, was his greatest enabler. She saw Leo's recklessness as bold ambition and my methodical competence as a quiet threat. Leo has the vision. Bella, she'd say, dismissing my carefully prepared reports on his catastrophic spending. You're good with details, which is wonderful. But someone has to steer the ship. She was content to let Leo steer it straight into an iceberg, as long as he looked good doing it. What I didn't know until later was just how close to the iceberg they were. Leo's last 2 acquisitions had cost the company nearly $8 million in losses. They were hemorrhaging cash, and the banks were getting nervous. The gala wasn't just another party. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to secure a massive investment from a private equity firm to cover up the gaping hole Leo had burned in our finances. To get that deal, they needed absolute control. They needed my father's controlling shares. And they needed my shares. 2. They weren't just abandoning my father's deathbed for a party. They were securing the means to seize his life's work, built on a foundation of integrity, and sell it for parts to cover their own failures. His death wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a business opportunity, a final, inconvenient hurdle to clear before they could cash in. My refusal to be their grieving compliant pawn sent them into a panic. Their response was not familial, but corporate and swift. The next morning, I tried to access my company email to begin coordinating funeral arrangements. Access denied. I called my office at the flagship Sterling Grand. My assistant, flustered, told me that security had been instructed not to let me on the premises. My corporate credit cards were frozen. In less than 24 hours, I was professionally excommunicated. Then the character assassination began. An article appeared on a prominent hospitality industry blog titled, "Tragedy at Sterling Group Heiress's Emotional Instability Raises Leadership Questions." It was filled with anonymous quotes from concerned executives describing my erratic behavior following my father's passing. They painted my grief-fueled rage in the hospital room as a hysterical breakdown, a sign that I was unfit to have any role in the company's future. They twisted my love for my father into a weakness, a liability. Leo and my mother were isolating me, cutting me off from my resources, and systematically destroying my reputation within the industry I had dedicated my life to. They weren't just taking the company, they were trying to erase me from it entirely. It was a declaration of war. They believed that by stripping me of my title and my access, they had rendered me powerless. They assumed my grief would paralyze me, that I would crumble under their coordinated assault. They underestimated me. They forgot that my father had taught me to fight, not just for profits, but for principles. Grief is a strange and powerful engine. My sorrow for my father was immense, but the fire of their betrayal burned hotter. As I sat in my apartment, locked out and slandered, I remembered my father's last lucid conversation with me. Just a week before he died, he had pressed a simple business card into my hand. It read, "Arthur Davies, Forensic Accounting. Bella." My father had whispered, his voice weak, but his eyes sharp. "When I'm gone, your mother and Leo, they will move fast. They don't see what I see. They don't value what we built. Trust Arthur. He knows where all the bodies are buried." It was my father's last gift, a weapon. I called the number. Arthur Davies was a quiet, meticulous man in his late 60s who had been my father's secret financial watchdog for 2 decades. He revered my father. When I explained what had happened, his voice was grim. "Your father feared this, Bella. He knew Leo was a liability and that your mother couldn't see it. Consider me at your service. They may have locked you out of the building, but they can't lock me out of the numbers." While Arthur began his digital excavation, I started building my own army. I didn't have executives. I had something better. I had the people who made the Sterling hotels run. I met with Maria, the head of housekeeping at the Grand, a woman who had worked there for 25 years. I had coffee with David, the chief engineer who could fix anything and knew the blueprints of every property by heart. I called Sarah, the concierge manager whose network of contacts was legendary. These were the people Leo and my mother overlooked, the little people they walked past every day. But they were loyal to my father's memory, and they were loyal to me. They had seen my work ethic, and they despised Leo's arrogance. They became my eyes and ears. Maria told me which executives were having secret meetings with Leo. David gave me security log reports, showing who was accessing my father's office late at night. Sarah used her network to find out everything she could about the investors my mother was courting. Information began to flow, painting a clear picture of their desperate, frantic consolidation of power. 2 weeks later, Arthur called me. "I think I have it," he said, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "It's worse than we thought." He had confirmed the multi-million-dollar losses from Leo's disastrous acquisitions. He'd found evidence of company funds being used for personal expenses, cars, vacations, my mother's extravagant redecorating projects. It was unethical and greedy. But it wasn't necessarily criminal. But this, Arthur continued, this is the silver bullet. He emailed me a scanned document. It was a transfer of stewardship. A legal instrument giving my mother and Leo complete control over my father's voting shares. It would give them the unassailable majority they needed to finalize the investment deal and push me out for good. My father's signature was at the bottom, looking slightly weaker than I remembered, but plausible. The document was dated 2 weeks before his death, a time when he was still lucid enough, legally, to sign such a thing. My heart sank. It looked legitimate. Look at the bottom right corner. Bella, Arthur instructed. The notary stamp. I zoomed in. It was a standard notary seal with a name and a commission number. It looked perfectly normal. I ran the commission number. Arthur said, the satisfaction evident in his voice. The notary is real, but this specific seal, with this commission number and design, was only issued by the state 10 days ago. 5 days, times, after times your father passed away. The air left my lungs. It was a forgery. A clumsy, arrogant forgery. In their haste to create a document that looked like my father signed it while he was still of sound mind, they had grabbed a notary and backdated the document. They never imagined anyone would check the issue date of the physical stamp itself. They had moved from unethical business practices to a clear, prosecutable felony. They hadn't just stolen my father's company, they had stolen his name and his legacy. And in their arrogance, they had given me the very weapon I needed to take it all back. The annual shareholder meeting was set to be their coronation. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Sterling Grand, the crown jewel of the empire my father had built. The room was filled with investors, board members, and industry press, all buzzing with the news of the impending $40 million investment from a firm called Northgate Equity. My mother and Leo stood at the podium, basking in the spotlight, projecting an image of strength and stability. They had scheduled the meeting quickly, hoping to finalize their coup before anyone could look too closely at the books. They believed I was defeated, a non-entity, grieving in isolation. They never saw me coming. I walked in through the main doors just as Leo began his opening remarks. A ripple of whispers went through the room. Leo faltered, his eyes widening in shock. My mother's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Security, she hissed to a guard near the stage. Remove her. She is not welcome here. I stopped in the center of the aisle and spoke, my voice calm and clear, amplified by the ballroom's acoustics. According to the company bylaws, as the beneficial owner of 25% of this company's shares, I am not only welcome here, I have a right to speak. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They knew I was right. Defeated. My mother gestured curtly for me to sit. I remained standing. I won't need a seat, I said, walking towards the stage. I have my own presentation. I connected my laptop to the main projector, replacing the Sterling Group's logo with a simple, stark spreadsheet. My brother, the vice president of acquisitions, has just told you about a bold new future for this company. I began, my voice even. But before we look to the future, let's take an honest look at the recent past. For 10 minutes, I used Arthur's data to walk the room through every disastrous deal Leo had made. I showed the millions in losses, the plummeting occupancy rates at his new properties, the staggering debt he had accrued. The confident smiles of the Northgate equity partners began to fade. The mood in the room shifted from celebratory to tense. Leo was sputtering, calling my numbers creative accounting and misinterpretations. My mother stared at me with pure hatred. These financial failures, I concluded, created a desperate need for cash and a desperate need for control. Which brings me to this. I clicked to the final slide. The forged document filled the giant screen behind me. This document transfers my father's controlling shares to my mother and brother. It is dated 2 weeks before he died. I paused, letting the room absorb it. However, I said, and I clicked again, highlighting the notary seal in a red box. This notary seal was not issued by the state until 5 days after my father's death. This document is a forgery. It is a criminal act, perpetrated to defraud this company and its shareholders. Panic erupted. My mother rushed to the microphone, shouting about lies and doctored evidence. Leo stood frozen, his face pale and clammy. And then, the ballroom doors at the back of the room opened. 2 plainclothes detectives and 4 uniformed officers walked in, their presence silencing the chaos. One of the detectives approached the stage, his eyes locked on my family. "Alara and Leo Sterling," he asked, his voice calm but firm. "You are under arrest on suspicion of corporate fraud and forgery." The flash of cameras was blinding as they were led away in handcuffs. Their public coronation transformed into a public execution. I stood on the stage, silent, watching the empire my father built finally being cleansed of the poison that had threatened to destroy it. In the chaotic aftermath, the board voted me in as interim CEO. The Northgate equity deal collapsed, but the public nature of the arrests brought the company's situation to light. Armed with Arthur's unvarnished data and a clear, honest plan to stabilize the business, I secured a better financing deal from a more reputable lender who valued transparency over a quick profit. My first act as CEO was to promote from within. Maria, the head of housekeeping, became the new director of hotel operations. David, the chief engineer, was promoted to oversee all property management. They had earned it. The months that followed were grueling but restorative. We sold off Leo's 2 most toxic assets, cut wasteful spending, and reinvested in the staff and properties that were the true heart of the company. We focused on my father's original vision, impeccable service, and timeless quality. I didn't run the company from a distant corner office. I walked the floors, talked to the staff, and listened to the guests. I was not my brother. I was my father's daughter. My mother and Leo took plea deals, avoiding long prison sentences, but receiving hefty fines and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer on any corporate board. They were disgraced, their names synonymous with a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. I never spoke to them again. There was nothing left to say. Today, 2 years later, I am sitting in my father's office, though now it is mine. The Sterling Hotel Group is more profitable and more respected than ever. We are thriving not because of reckless ambition, but because of a return to integrity. The grief for my father is no longer a raw wound, but a quiet, steady presence, a reminder of the man he was and the legacy he entrusted to me. I look out the window at the sprawling city, and for the first time since he left, I feel a sense of profound and earned peace. If you are watching this and have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, know that your strength is greater than your pain. Have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours against your own family? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could give someone else the courage to stand up and fight back. Please subscribe for more stories of resilience. Remember, sometimes the only way to honor a legacy is to rebuild it from the ashes of betrayal.